Welcome back into Hoosier Sports Night. Well, we decided to ditch the set to have a roundtable discussion here on IU Sports, but being student television, we actually couldn't afford to buy a roundtable, but we'll do the best with what we can. Regardless, the topic of conversation this evening is Indiana University men's basketball, and to help facilitate the conversation, we welcome in some good friends here at Hoosier Sports Night, HSN producer Casey Richards and WIUX Sports Director Ben Heisler. Guys, appreciate you both taking some time to talk IU basketball, and let's jump straight into it. Now, we knew it was going to be a tough year for Indiana men's basketball. After all, they have just 2 players returning from last year's team, which was eliminated in the first round of the NCAA tournament. But was it supposed to be this bad? The Hoosiers are just 5-15 overall, 0-8 in conference play, and Ben, the Hoosiers have lost 11 straight games. Like I said, we knew it was going to be bad, but should it be this bad?
I don't know if it should necessarily be this bad, guys, because you look at the way that they finished the non-conference schedule going in at 5-5, and you're thinking, well, maybe they have an opportunity to get, a few Big Ten wins down the road, maybe finish the season with 8 or 9 wins. But ever since, it's been a slippery slope right at around 0-8, as you guys said, in the Big Ten. But you know what? I think it's not so much a disappointment right now because they're competing in all of the ball games that they're in. Now, especially over the last few games against Northwestern in particular, Ohio State, they had the lead at halftime. And you know what? I think you can't look at this as a disappointment because they are improving, and they got a couple games that I think are winnable down the road for them.
One thing I think a lot of people didn't take into account was how good the Big Ten was going to be this year. I mean, we had a home game against Penn State where, maybe going into the season, that's a game you expect the Hoosiers to win. But, Penn State just beat Michigan State. They're a legitimate tournament team. Same with Northwestern. So I think going into the year, maybe there are some games where people could expect the Hoosiers to win. But in reality, I mean, they've been underdogs in all these games, and rightfully so.
Now, it seems like Indiana's finding ways to lose games. You look at Northwestern, they're in it. They lose by 2 on the road, but a bounce pass to the right guy that actually gets to Pritchard. Maybe that game goes to overtime. Maybe they win it. You look at the loss against Ohio State this past weekend. The Buckeyes shot an unprecedented 76% from the field. Ben, is this typical of a young team that it seems as if they're going to find new ways to lose?
No, I think it's exactly the way a young and new team plays together. So you're looking at a roster that includes a ton of freshmen, one guy that's a senior, a couple sophomores. A lot of times good teams find a way to win, and a lot of bad teams, a lot of teams that are necessarily not bad, but trying to improve, find ways to lose. And that's really the problem with Indiana this year. They're finding ways to lose, but they're also gaining some momentum in those losses. I know it's difficult to almost fathom in a sense, but they are getting better, and that you have to look at that as a positive.
Yeah, and Coach Crean had a good quote after the Minnesota game where they had so many chances to take the lead. They had a last shot, and he said there's going to come a day where they don't kill their own momentum, whether it be, the crowd getting really into it or if they're just playing well. And right now, with a young team, they just do things that an older team wouldn't do, whether it be commit a turnover, commit a foul, and those things I think will eventually go away, and they'll eventually get over the hump.
Now, the spotlight this year has certainly been on Tom Pritchard, and the freshman has excelled. He's leading all Big Ten freshmen in points per game and rebounds per game. And you saw a little bit of a different Tom Pritchard in the first few minutes of the loss this weekend to Ohio State, aggressively going to the basket for a dunk. And longtime friend of Hoosier Sports Night, Ken Bykoff, the writer for Inside Indiana, turned around and said to me, that is not the Tom Pritchard that we saw back in November. Casey, what have you seen in Pritchard's development up to this point in the year?
Well, statistically, it's kind of surprising. His statistics have really gone down ever since Big Ten play started. He's only had 1 double-double so far. That was the game at Ohio State, but I think you can attribute that to a couple things. 1 being the fact that defense is key in on him now, and 2 being the fact that everybody around him has improved as well. He's not the focal point of the offense anymore. You think back to the beginning of the year, it seems like the Hoosiers couldn't make a 3, but these last 3 games they've been over 50% from three-point range, so they haven't had to rely on him as often. So statistically, he hasn't really improved since the beginning of Big Ten play, but I think if you watch the games, you could see why.
I think when you take a look at Tom Pritchard, guys, you look at someone who's still learning to be 6'8", 235 pounds. Now, this is a guy that is very physical, and a lot of the times he's almost too physical around the basket. He's getting so many offensive rebounds because he's making his own misses. And I think that's something that Pritchard's going to learn. Now, I think the other thing that he needs to work on is staying out of foul trouble. They need his size on the court because when you have a complete guard-dominated lineup, you're going to need him inside, getting those offensive and defensive rebounds, cleaning up that mess on a lot of those threes.
Well, Ben, how much does it hurt? Sorry, Casey. How much does it hurt that this team doesn't have size? Certainly, if you take Pritchard out of the game, you've got Tabor, the lone senior who has played relatively well. Granted, this is a guy who was a walk-on, and realistically, he plays like a walk-on. And then Tijon Jobe, who is doing exactly what you can expect from a guy who probably has never actually been coached for real in basketball. So how much does it hurt Pritchard that if he goes down, if he gets in foul trouble, there's no help behind him?
Well, it's a lot of pressure to have that much on a big guy, especially a freshman, because usually you look at a freshman like Tom Pritchard in a program like Indiana, and typically he's not going to be starting, or at least he's not going to be relied on as the big man inside. So I think what you have to do with Pritchard is you have to say, okay, get your boards, get inside, try and get as many looks as you possibly can. And I really think the pressure's sort of building on him a little bit. Now, let's make no mistake about it. He's going to be a good player, and he's going to be a 4-year starter for this Indiana program. But until he's able to get that big physicality, be able to dominate on the offensive and the defensive glass, it's going to be a struggle for him because it's a young team, and they're still learning on the fly.
Yeah, and you mentioned the fouls earlier. He has 11 games with 4 fouls this year out of 20. And like we said, that's just something he can't do. But that's just a sign of young players. You know, there's been a lot also lately about the officiating and how that's kind of, the fans really haven't been too happy with it. Crean wasn't too happy with it. But, I mean, if you really look at it, sure, there's a couple calls here and there, but it's just frustration setting in. The Hoosiers are committing these fouls because they're such a young team. Not only Pritchard, but Dumas committing the foul at the end of the Northwestern game. Granted, he's a junior, but it's really his first year of major Division I experience. So that's just something that'll go away with time for not only Pritchard, I think, but the rest of the team as well.
And at the same time, Coach Crean still needs to get familiar with the officials here in the Big Ten Conference. Now, we'll talk more about Coach Crean in a little bit, but one more player I want to focus in on, that's Matt Roth. I mean, what can you say about the kid? 9 for 11 from beyond the three-point arc, a career-high 29 points in the loss against Ohio State. I mean, he just was hitting shots. And this is a guy who set the high school record in Illinois for most threes. And, Ben, it's like he finally found that three-point shot on Saturday.
And we've been finally waiting for Matt Roth to finally heat up. And this is a guy that doesn't necessarily have the athletic ability on his own to go ahead and set up a three-point shot. But when he's able to go around a couple screens, guys, he's dynamic. One of those pure shooters that, you know, sometimes he's going to be a little bit inconsistent, but you still have to try and find ways to get him the ball really at any means possible. But it's really good to see this guy get himself going because, as we saw in the last game, he's dominant from the three-point line when he's heating up.
And something you mentioned earlier in your story, 90 of his 99 field goal attempts this year have been three-pointers. 39 of his 41 makes have been threes. And, you know, you hate to keep bringing it up, but it's the truth. It's another sign of a young player when their game is one-faceted. That's something that'll be interesting to see if he can develop as his career goes along, you know, rebounding, defense. You know, he had 29 points this last game, 0 rebounds, 0 assists. And, you know, obviously his main job right now is to shoot threes, but it'll be interesting to see if down the road he can kind of add other elements to his game.
And you can certainly see where Coach Crean has the pieces. Certainly it's a long way until he can put it all together to make a puzzle of a really good team, but you figure 2-3 years down the line, if you got Matt Roth that can go and hit threes, you got Pritchard as a junior or a senior inside with 3 or 4 solid years of experience in the Big Ten playing inside, Coach Crean could have a lot ahead of him that looks good. And that's the next question. I don't want to talk about grades. I think that's a little bit ridiculous, but how do you think Tom Crean has done this year given the circumstances?
I certainly think he's done a fantastic job because he's instilled some confidence in a bunch of young players that really aren't in a confident situation right now, going 0-8 in the Big Ten and 5-15 in the regular season. But he had the motto of never give up, and the players have bought into this system. Now, granted, this is a team that a lot of people picked dead last in the Big Ten, and obviously they're making those experts look right, but Tom Crean has installed that ability, sort of that feistiness in this team, and and a lot of other teams in the Big Ten know that they're not going down without a fight. And so I think when you have that lack of talent on the court to compare with some very good Big Ten teams, I think he's done a marvelous job in instilling that confidence and that ability in this team.
And I think the fact that you could see market improvement as well. If you look at the 2 Ohio State games this year, when they went to Columbus, granted it is a big difference between playing on the road and playing at home, but they were much more competitive in the game at home against Ohio State than they were on the road. And it'll be interesting to see towards the end of this Big Ten schedule. You know, they get Iowa at home coming up this week. They gave Iowa a good game at Iowa. We'll be able to see if, you know, they can maybe pull out a win over the Hawkeyes. Same with Northwestern coming to Assembly Hall. So I think not only the fact that he's got them playing hard and competing, but that the fact that they've been obviously improving to those that are watching, I think is, you know, what's been really good.
All right, Ben, Casey, good stuff as always. We certainly have to do this again sometime soon, and always a pleasure talking Indiana University basketball. That is all the time that we have on this edition of Hoosier Sports Night. On behalf of Alexis Hozier, I'm Ronan O'Shea. Thanks a lot for watching, and be sure to tune in again next week as we have complete coverage from the Hoosiers' road trip to Michigan State. Have a good night.